Yo, what is good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy Podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson. I am your host. Today is Saturday, December 6th. I'm recording this in the late afternoon, early evening. So if any news breaks between now and Sunday, obviously, keep your ears open for any developments after you listen to this. But in this episode, we are going to be previewing week 14 of the 2025 fantasy football season. This is a big week. Some of you might be in playoffs. I know one of my leagues, it's like a 2-week per round playoff thing. So I have a playoff matchup already, but for most leagues, this is the week before the playoffs. Some of you are in some win in, get in situations. Some of you might just be, you might be out of it, but you're still participating, which is huge for the integrity of the league. Even if you're out of it, make sure you set your lineups and everything. And yeah, we're going to do a quick recap of that Thursday night football game that was awesome the other night. And most importantly, we're going to get into my starts of the week for week 14. And I never miss. Right? Yeah, totally. Anyways, don't look at my picks from the past. Just accept that they're all 100% great. This is episode 54. So welcome. Where should we start? Let's start with the starts of the week. Okay. That's kind of my favorite section. It's kind of what the people are here for. So we're going to go position by position. I got one of each: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. These are guys that I think have, they're usually I pick someone that has, high upside, really good matchup, a bounce back candidate. I try not to pick guys like, Christian McCaffrey that you're starting each and every week. Regardless, by the way, this is my co-host today. This is Cooper. He's my wiener dog. If you do want to see him, you can head over to the YouTube and watch the video version of the podcast. If you're not already there, just look up Fantasy Football Prodigy and it'll be on my channel there with the green and black logo. Otherwise, if you are listening to an audio only version of the pod, just know that there is a wiener dog behind me. So, starts of the week. Let's get into it. Quarterback start of the week: Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams on the road against the Arizona Cardinals. Stafford had been playing at an MVP level before a down fantasy performance against the Panthers last week, where he had 3 turnovers. It was a rough game, but he had been rolling all season, and I'm not letting one bad game scare me away from Stafford this week against the Cardinals. This game has the second highest over-under of the week at 47.5, and even though the Rams are 10-point favorites, quarterback Jacoby Brissett on the other side of this matchup has been slinging it enough where this could turn into a bit of a shootout if both offenses are clicking. I like Matthew Stafford as a mid to high quarterback 1 in week 14. Let me say that again because I do put this in a TikTok and I kind of stuttered there. So I like Matthew Stafford as a mid to high quarterback 1 in week 14. Much better. Thank you for the true podcast listeners that get to see behind the scenes. Anyways, moving on. Running back start of the week: Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals on the road against the Buffalo Bills. The season started terribly for Brown, but since week 7, he is the running back 8 overall and in points per game. This week, he takes on a run funnel Bills defense that has allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to running backs over the last 8 weeks. Let me say that again. Sorry. This week, he takes on a run funnel Bills defense that has allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to running backs over the last 8 weeks. So the matchup is fantastic. Also, this game has the highest over-under of any game on the week at 52.5 points. So there could be a ton of scoring in this matchup, which we love for all players in this game. I like Chase Brown as a low to mid running back 1 in week 14. We had another stutter. Let's try to get through this one without, losing our footing. Wide receiver start of the week: Michael Wilson of the Arizona Cardinals at home against the Los Angeles Rams. Yeah, they are at home. I almost forgot. Michael Wilson has come out of nowhere and become a fantasy force with Jacoby Brissett taking over at quarterback. I want to highlight Wilson this week because fellow Cardinals wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. has been ruled out. When Marv was out in weeks 11 and 12, Michael Wilson stepped up in a huge way, seeing 18 and 15 targets in those games, respectively. He turned those targets into 15 receptions for 185 yards in week 11 and 10 receptions for 118 yards in week 12. The Cardinals have been throwing the ball a ton, and they likely won't be able to establish the run even if they tried this week, with a lack of running back talent and a brutal matchup against the Rams' run defense. In a game where they are expected to be trailing with a high over-under of 47.5, I think the Cardinals are going to continue needing to air it out, so I expect Wilson to see a healthy number of targets. I like Michael Wilson as a mid wide receiver 2 in week 14. And then finally, tight end start of the week, Brenton Strange of the Jacksonville Jaguars at home against the Indianapolis Colts. Could he win your matchup this week? Stranger things have happened. That's a good one. In his 2 games back from injury, Strange put up 5 receptions for 93 yards on 5 targets in week 12, and 3 receptions for 45 yards and a touchdown on 4 targets in week 13. In week 14, he gets a great matchup with the Colts that have struggled against tight ends all season, allowing the 3rd most points per game to the position on the year. This game has the 3rd highest over-under of the week at 46.5, which we love for the offenses in this game. Trevor Lawrence, who is a good streaming option at quarterback this week in his own right, has been putting up solid numbers lately, and I think he can find Strange in this matchup. He's not an elite option like those top handful of guys, but I like Brenton Strange as a mid tight end 1 in week 14. And ladies and gentlemen, those are my starts of the week. Let's get right into the Thursday Night Football recap. I know I'm recording this on Saturday, so a lot of you have probably heard about this game already, but the Detroit Lions at home took down the Dallas Cowboys 44-30. Very high scoring game, 74 total points. Had a really high over-under heading into the game, and it still hit the over. The Lions really needed this win to keep their playoff hopes alive. They're at 8-5. Cowboys are 6-6-1. Both teams really needed this win, but the Lions just look just like the better complete team. Both quarterbacks were fine. Jared Goff, 25 of 34, 309 yards, but only 1 touchdown. And then same thing for Dak Prescott, 31 of 47, 376 yards, but only 1 touchdown, and he threw 2 picks. So both were still okay for fantasy, but not as great as you had hoped, especially, knowing that they scored 74 points in this game. On the winning side for the Lions, David Montgomery only had 6 carries. I had him on a bench in a league, but he turned those 6 carries into 60 yards and a touchdown. I thought the Cowboys' run defense was getting better, but apparently not. He ripped off like a 35-yard rushing touchdown, and the only reason he broke that last tackle to break away is because he was on my bench. He also added 1 for 13 on his 1 target. Jahmyr Gibbs scored 3 touchdowns in this game, though. That's the big story. 12 for 43 on the ground, so they contained him. All of his touchdowns came on the ground. And he added 7 for 77 through the air on 7 targets. Caught them all. And then Jameson Williams was going to be my start of the week if I recorded this earlier. So I'm a little disappointed I didn't get that in. But Amon-Ra St. Brown ended up playing, which is part of the reason I didn't record earlier than Thursday, is because normally I don't anyways. But I didn't know the status of Amon-Ra until shortly before game time. But Jameson Williams still with St. Brown active was 7 for 96, 9 targets. He looked great. Added a carry for 7 yards. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, questions of if you should start him with the injury. He looked great. 6 for 92 on 9 targets. And then even Isaac Tesla, who, a lot of people probably benched him once Amon-Ra St. Brown was deemed active. He only saw 3 targets, but he caught 2 of them for 20 yards and a touchdown. So he was still serviceable. And then on the other side, everyone had a good game for the Cowboys pretty much, except for George Pickens. So on the ground, Javonte Williams was 17 for 67 and a touchdown. You love that in a tough matchup. He also had 2 receptions for 0 yards for what it's worth. CeeDee Lamb was great, 6 for 121 on 8 targets. And he even left this game early with, I believe it was a concussion. He hit the ground, and he kind of did that thing that Tua did in primetime years back, where his body kind of got stiff and it was kind of, scary. So hopefully he's okay. I mean, obviously, he got injured, but hopefully since then he's been able to heal up. And this was a Thursday game, so if that would have happened on Sunday, I'd be pretty doubtful that he plays next week. But with this game being on Thursday, with the extra rest before their next game, it's very possible that we see him back. But it did look like a pretty scary injury at the time. And then George Pickens, who had been awesome for most of the season, 5 for 37. He did see 9 targets, but there were some comments about his effort and his overall performance being in question. So, he's had some character issues in the past. So I don't know really what to make of this game. But even with CeeDee Lamb out, he didn't capitalize. Who did capitalize was Ryan Flournoy. Yeah, you heard that right. 13 targets, 9 for 115 and a touchdown through the air. So he stepped up in a big way. And then Jake Ferguson, 5 for 58 on 7 targets. He's slowing down a bit since the beginning of the season when CeeDee Lamb was out, but you'll take 5 for 58 from your tight end if you don't have one of those, truly elite guys, which it looked like maybe, he was going to become. Next week, the Cowboys do take on the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday Night Football. So hopefully we have clarity on CeeDee Lamb before that game, with it being later in the day, so that you can make, start-sit decisions with him before noon. Because if he plays, he's probably going to be good against my Vikings. All right, that's enough time spent on that game. Let's move on to the rest of the Week 14 matchups. We're going to start with the Indianapolis Colts at 8-4, taking on the Jacksonville Jags at 8-4 in Jacksonville. Why can't I see the depth chart here? Oh, here we go. So Sauce Gardner is out for the Colts. That's kind of a big deal here. This game has a 46.5 point over-under. The Colts are 1.5 point road favorites. And with no Sauce Gardner, maybe Jacksonville can air it out a little bit. Trevor Lawrence was almost my start of the week. I ended up not doing that, but I think he's a fine streaming option, not a must start. But with the over-under, with no Sauce Gardner, I think you can start Trevor Lawrence. Travis Etienne, I would still be starting with confidence in this game at running back, but Bashaw Tutin is also getting more and more involved in that backfield. So Travis Etienne is more of a running back 2 in this matchup, unfortunately. Where, just because, Tutin is getting involved, he's getting goal line carries. Tutin in his own right is still not someone that I really want to start. He's kind of similar to like Blake Corum, where, maybe he'll get some carries and maybe he'll fall in the end zone. Like, he scored every other week since their bye week. For what it's worth, if you follow the pattern, he's not supposed to score this week. I know that's not really good analysis, but that is the truth. So just someone to kind of monitor. And then at wide receiver, a big thing to monitor here is Parker Washington for Jacksonville. He's listed as questionable as of this recording, so monitor the news with him. There's a chance he doesn't play. If he's out, that increases my confidence in, Brenton Strange at tight end, who I talked about as my start of the week. Brian Thomas Jr., Jacoby Myers. Obviously, Brian Thomas Jr. has been one of the biggest busts in all of fantasy football this year, if not the biggest. So Brian Thomas Jr. between Jacoby Myers is honestly, it's close. I would probably Jacoby Myers is safer. He's shown that, even in his short time with Jacksonville, like, he can at least get receptions, and get open. Like last week, 6 for 90 and a touchdown on 6 targets. The week before that, 4 for 50 and a touchdown on 6 targets. So, at this point, I'd probably lean Jacoby Myers over Brian Thomas Jr., but I think you can start Brian Thomas Jr. if you don't have a better option. But, you probably drafted him in the second round, but at this point, like, he's like a low wide receiver 2 at best, maybe even a high wide receiver 3. He just hasn't done really anything all year. He has 1 receiving touchdown on the year. So it's really unfortunate. I drafted him over Jonathan Taylor, which obviously was not the right decision, but the Colts are they're a pretty good matchup for receivers. So, maybe it's a spot where he can have a get right game. And then Trevor Lawrence is a nice streamer. And then I believe it says they're without Walker Little, their left tackle. Jacksonville is he their starter? I don't know a ton about the Jacksonville Jags offensive line, but he is out. So that is not ideal for Jacksonville. Is he Walker Little? How do you find out? Yeah, he is their starting. Okay. So something to monitor there. And then for the Colts, Danny Dimes is someone that I'm starting to cool a little bit on just because he's dealing with an injury. So you can start him as like a high quarterback too, but it's not the smash matchup that it once was, or the smash start that it once was. In terms of the matchup, Jacksonville, it's a pretty good matchup, the quarterbacks. So, you can stream him, but there's a chance that you have someone better. They're a tough team to run on, Jacksonville is, but obviously you're starting Jonathan Taylor. And then, after that, you have a few receivers in the Colts receiver room that are always kind of in play. Michael Pittman is a solid, wide receiver too. He's kind of cooled down a little bit. He hasn't had more than 27 yards in their last 3 games. 2 of those games were against Kansas City and Houston, though. And against Kansas City, he did salvage it with a touchdown. So, Jacksonville's kind of middle of the pack against receivers. So I think you can start him if you don't have, better options. But like a guy like Christian Watson, who's kind of come on lately, I would probably start him for the Packers over Michael Pittman. Same with Alec Pierce. He's kind of having a breakout year. Between him and Pittman, Pierce has honestly been better lately, and he's probably more likely to have a big game. I think both are kind of fine starts. Pittman is probably a little safer, but you can start either one of them as kind of wide receiver 2s. And then the odd man out is Josh Downs, who's a talented player, but just hasn't had a ton of fantasy production this year. So I'm staying away from him. And then Tyler Warren at tight end. He's a must start tight end. Jacksonville, I believe they're a pretty good. Yeah, they're the second best matchup for tight ends on the season, schedule adjusted and overall. The only one worse is the Bengals, who are historically bad against the position. Tyler Warren he's been good, he's been pretty good. Last week, 22 yards, but a touchdown. The week before that, 45 yards on 5 catches. The bye week, and then the week before that, 10 targets, 8 for 99. So you're playing him. He's a top 3 play. I'd play him over Kelsey and Strange and Pitts and Ferguson, but Bowers and McBride, I'd probably lean over McBride for sure. Bowers and Warren are kind of similar. Let's move on to the next game. This game is also probably the most exciting game of the week. It has the highest over under. The Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. The Bengals are 4-8, technically still alive for the playoffs, so this means something to them. Joe Burrow is back, if you don't remember. And then the Bills are 8-4 at home. Kind of reeling a little bit, sort of need a win. 52.5 point over under. The Bills are 6-point home favorites. Trey Hendrickson is out for the Bengals at defensive end. They have a number of, defensive injuries, and their defense is just terrible in general. So it's a good matchup across the board for the Bills, really. And Darius Slay is, didn't he recently sign with them? It says he's on the reserve did not report list. Okay. So I believe they signed him, but he's not playing. Whoa, there's kind of a weird situation going on. I looked him up. So he's on the reserve did not report list. It says he's not reporting to the Bills. Is he just like permanently not going to be on their team? Prioritizing family time and not wanting to move again. Oh. What? That's weird. Okay. I didn't hear that. So they're not going to have him. Joey Bosa out. Big injury to watch here is Dalton Kincaid at tight end. If he's active, this is, like I was just saying, the best matchup for tight ends in all of fantasy football. So if Dalton Kincaid is active, I'm totally fine starting him. If him versus guys like, Kyle Pitts, in that sort of tier, I think Kincaid has a little more upside with his high over under and the matchup. Him versus Brenton Strange, that's a real question. I would like to learn more about his health. Kincaid already doesn't play a ton of snaps as it is, and he really only needs like a touchdown to be good for fantasy. So, him versus Brenton Strange is very close. Unless it comes out that he's severely limited, I would probably lean Kincaid just because of the matchup, and he's been really good when healthy. But Josh Allen, you're starting, obviously. James Cook, you're starting. And then at wide receiver, Joshua Palmer is doubtful. So, Keon Coleman, Gabe Davis, Khalil Shakir. The only one, they just signed Brandon Cooks. The only guy I'm really interested in maybe starting is Khalil Shakir at this point as, a high wide receiver 3, I would say. And then for the Bengals, Joe Burrow is a fine start. The Bengals are more of a run funnel defense. So I think Chase Brown, who is my start of the week, he is an excellent play. The Bills are the second toughest matchup against quarterbacks in the league. But still, Joe Burrow is, a really good quarterback. So, he's sort of in that mid quarterback 1 range. Like him versus Mahomes is kind of a tough decision because Mahomes is playing Houston, which is also it's actually the only matchup tougher than the Bills. I'd probably lean Mahomes just because he had a great week last week, and Burrow, he's coming back from that injury. But I don't know, man. This could be a high scoring game, and if it's a back and forth, Joe Burrow might be awesome. Oh, man, Houston's defense is so good. I'd maybe ask me again in an hour, but I might lean Joe Burrow there over Mahomes. Is that crazy? The Chiefs do have to win that game too, which is kind of the other factor. I'd play them both over Lamar Jackson just because he's clearly still banged up and dealing with an injury. Over Bo Nix, even though it's a kind of good matchup against the Raiders, we just saw him not do anything against this same matchup a few weeks ago. Their offenses looked very inconsistent. It's supposed to snow in this game. Looks like about 30 degrees according to NFL weather. But only 5-mile-an-hour winds. I'm not too worried about it. Just if there's a little snow, it doesn't really matter that much. Chase Brown's a great running back 1 start. Jamar Chase, you're starting him. T. Higgins, he'd been dealing with a concussion. Looks like is he good to go? I don't see an injury designation on him anymore. Yeah, looks like he's good. So he should be starting. He's a solid, wide receiver 2 with upside. Kind of a tough matchup. My dog hears something out there. So he's obviously reacting appropriately by thinking the world is ending. And then, you got Mike Gesicki, Noah Fant at tight end. I'm not really wanting to start any of them. But, they do exist. So let's move on to the next matchup. Steelers at Ravens. Both teams 6-6. Both teams in desperate need of a win. Cooper is really tweaked. It's actually my roommate, also known as my girlfriend. She's just walking out there, and my dog thinks it's an intruder, which is the logical thing to think, right? Right, Coop? Hey, Cooper, you can calm down. It's okay. It's okay. But I could see this game being pretty disgusting. Only a 42.5 point over under. The Ravens are 6-point home favorites. Lamar Jackson is back. He's been playing, but it hasn't really been good for the offense, good for fantasy. There's a good chance he's still like limited by this injury. He's still in play just because he's Lamar Jackson, but he's more of a low to mid quarterback 1 than a must start like he normally is. He's been like in the quarterback 20s the last few weeks. So, not great. So temper expectations. Derrick Henry is someone that I will be playing with confidence as a like low to mid running back 1. This game is in Baltimore outside, but it looks like it should be about in the 40s. No rain or snow predicted, so the weather should be fine. Other than that, for the Ravens, Zay Flowers is someone you can start, but he's really not doing much for fantasy. He's consistently, getting like 60 to 70-ish yards. He hasn't had a touchdown since week 1, though. He hasn't had more than, 78 yards since week 1. So a solid floor, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, but I question the upside on a week-to-week basis, especially in this matchup that is expected to maybe not be the most high-scoring game of the week, especially with the Steelers' offense also struggling lately. Then Mark Andrews, you can play Mark Andrews as a kind of touchdown-dependent tight end. He was my start of the week at tight end for Thanksgiving, and I liked the process where the tight end position scored a lot against the Bengals, and Mark Andrews was part of it, but he was only 4 for 47 on 6 targets. Where was it? How many targets? 6 targets. Where Isaiah Likely kind of finally had his breakout game of the season. He was 5 for 95 on 6 targets and almost scored a touchdown, but had it punched out at the 1. So, if Likely is going to be involved, that eats into Mark Andrews a little bit more, which hurts. But you can still start Andrews as a touchdown dependent, low to mid tight end 1, especially against the Steelers defense that is 4th. It's the 4th best matchup schedule adjusted on the year. And then for the Steelers, the only people I really want to start would be Jaylen Warren and DK Metcalf. Aaron Rodgers is dealing with a bit of an injury, it sounds like. He did miss a game. He came back, and, it didn't look great last week. He came back last week against the Bills. It's a tough matchup, but he was 10 of 21, not pushing the ball downfield at all. 117 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, no rushing yards. So, not looking to play Rodgers, obviously, but Jaylen Warren, the Ravens defense is getting healthier. It's not as bad as it was at the beginning of the year, but Jaylen Warren is still getting enough volume where he's pretty much an every week running back 2 at worst. Kenneth Gainwell is there as well. A couple weeks ago, he really was involved in the passing game. I believe, did Jaylen Warren get banged up in that game? I can't remember. But last week, Gainwell came out in a great matchup against the Bills. Only saw 3 targets, turned into 2 for 25. Only had 5 for 20 on the ground. So not really someone I want to play outside of like a running back 3 type of guy. And then at wide receiver, they just signed Adam Thielen. That doesn't really affect things that much, in my opinion, especially this week. Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin. I don't really want to play any of those guys. But DK Metcalf is someone you can play, but he has been hugely disappointing. Early in the year, we were kind of complaining that it was like, oh, it's so touchdown dependent. The only reason he's good is that he's scoring touchdowns. Well, now he's not getting really any yards, and he's not getting the touchdowns. He hasn't scored since week 8. He hasn't had more than 49 yards since that time. And the offense is struggling. So he's a low wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3. But like, I'd probably play him versus Zay Flowers is tough. Flowers is safer. Metcalf probably has higher upside, but I'd probably lean Flowers. I'd play like Cortland Sutton over him. Christian Watson. That's going to be my like barometer, is would I play Christian Watson over this guy or not. Let's get out of that game. It's pretty gross. Let's move on to the Seahawks at the Falcons. So the Seahawks are 9-3, just destroyed my Vikings a couple weeks ago, or last week with Max Brosmer. And then the Falcons are 4-8 at home, kind of struggling a little bit here. So this should be a slaughter, even though the Falcons are at home. 44.5 point over under. The Seahawks are 6.5 point road favorites. I honestly thought it'd be higher than that, but Drake London is out for the Falcons, and obviously, if you didn't know, Michael Penix Jr., their normal quarterback is out, so Kirk Cousins is going to start again, which isn't great for the offense. So on the Falcons side of things, that makes Kyle Pitts startable at tight end with no Drake London. Kind of a nice floor play. He was almost my start of the week, but I don't know if he has a ton of touchdown upside, a ton of just upside in general. But like last week with no Drake London, he saw 8 targets, turned into 7 for 82. So if you get that out of him, I think you're going to be really happy. And the Seahawks against tight ends on the season, they are the fourth best matchup on the year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're like the seventh best matchup schedule adjusted, but they give it up to tight ends. And then obviously you're starting Bijan Robinson. Darnell Mooney, I don't really want to start him, even though he is going to be their de facto number one. It just really hasn't worked out for fantasy much lately this year for him. He had his moment where he was good, like last year at times. Like he was a solid streamer, but it's just really not working this year. And the Seahawks are a pretty tough defense against receivers, ranking at 9th schedule adjusted on the year. So I think you can do better. 7th overall, toughest matchup. But Bijan Robinson, you're starting with confidence at running back. Tyler Algier, he's always someone you can put out there and hope he scores a touchdown because he is kind of their goal line back in a way. He does get goal line opportunities, but not someone I'm looking to start, especially because the Seahawks are also a tough defense against running backs. They're the 5th toughest on the season. So it's pretty much Bijan, Kyle Pitts, and then log off. And then for the Seahawks, I like the running backs in this game. Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet are both startable. Kenneth Walker hasn't had the year that we were hoping for. He's seeing, since their bye week, 11, 14, 16, 11, 13 carries. He sees anywhere from 1 to 4 targets. So if he scores, you'll probably be happy. He's kind of in that running back 2 range in terms of, guys you can play at the running back position. It's not the most exciting thing, but the Falcons on the year are, let's see, where do they rank on the year against running backs? 23rd against running backs. I want to say they've gotten worse. Like they gave up that big Jonathan Taylor game. So yeah, over the last, I set it to 8 weeks. They are the 5th best matchup for running backs. The Falcons are. So do with that information what you will. There are opportunities here to exploit, and especially with the Seahawks being favored, that game script could lend itself to the Seahawks being able to run the ball. This game is in a dome, so we don't have to worry about weather. Zach Charbonnet is someone you can start as well. Him and Walker have a bit of a split going on. That is the guy that I started over David Montgomery, just because Montgomery hadn't been seeing more than a handful of carries in a given week, and once again he only had 6 carries, but he did break off a 35-yard touchdown. Whereas Charbonnet, since the bye, 8, 14, 11, 6, and 14 carries. He scored each of the last 2 weeks, 3 of the last 4, and I like his odds to score again here. So he's a touchdown dependent running back 3, I would say. And then in that wide receiver room, the only one I'm starting would be Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's a machine. You start him every single week. Rashid Shaheed hasn't done anything since being traded to Seattle from New Orleans, so I'm not putting him in the lineup until he does something. Cooper Kupp, I'm not starting. At tight end, AJ Barner is the one you would want, but I think you can do better than him. A few weeks ago, he had that big 10 for 70 performance in week 11 against the Rams, saw 11 targets, but since then, 4 targets, 2 for 18 against Tennessee, and then last week, 5 targets, 4 for 35 against the Vikings. So not really a spot I'm looking to start someone. And then Sam Darnold, he's an okay start. I mean, we've seen him not, when he's not needed to throw the ball a ton, the team is fine, kind of just relying on their defense and the running game. And this could be a game where, Darnold doesn't need to air it out. So, the Falcons are kind of middle of the pack against quarterbacks on the season. If he happens to throw a couple touchdowns, he could be fine, but I'm probably looking elsewhere. He's sort of in that mid quarterback 2 range. Sorry, mid quarterback 2 range. My phone just flew out of my pocket. Minnesota Vikings, best team in the league, Skull baby, hosting the Washington Commanders. The Vikings at 4-8, Commanders at 3-9. The Commanders are 1.5 point road favorites. Over under is 43.5. So it should be a pretty close game. I will be at this game actually. And the Minnesota Wind Chill Ultimate Frisbee team will be playing at halftime. So Skull Wind Chill, I'll be there with the team. So, maybe we can get, the Wind Chill can get a dub and the Vikings can get a dub. Offensive line for the Vikings, Darisaw is questionable. Donovan Jackson questionable at guard. So the big one is Darisaw. Last week, I think we had like 3 of our linemen out by the end of the game. Like the whole left side of the line was hurt. Looks like Ryan Kelly at center should be active. And then for the Commanders, Bobby Wagner is questionable. Marshawn Lattimore is on IR still, looks like. So those are kind of the big injuries that I can see. Is Jaden Daniels officially active yet? Or is he still... I don't see an injury designation on this thing. It says he'll be back this week. Okay. Interesting. So, if Daniels is active, I think you can start him. He's Jaden Daniels. So this game's in a dome. Even though it's in Minnesota with cold weather, it is indoors. So don't need to worry about that. On one of my rosters, I have Justin Herbert, and then I picked up Jaden Daniels that someone dropped. So even though the Vikings have a good defense, Jaden Daniels is in that tier of quarterback where you can start him as long as he's good to go. So monitor the news and everything. But even Marcus Mariota had been a solid streamer with Daniels out. So I think Daniels is someone not as a must start, but if you don't have a really good option, I think you can start him. Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel. It's been gross lately. With Daniels back, maybe that,
helps.
But again, I know the Vikings, I don't have a good record, but they really are a quarterback away, or, some better quarterback play away from being a really good playoff team. Like last year with Sam Darnold, 14-2. Our defense is still really good. 6th against quarterbacks, the 6th toughest. Against receivers, the Vikings rank 2nd, the 2nd toughest. So, McLaurin and Deebo, they're good enough where you can play them, but could be a bit limited. Deebo is like a wide receiver 3. He's probably going to need a touchdown, maybe get a handoff, run in the end zone. And then McLaurin, he's kind of in that low wide receiver 2 area, I would say. Last week against Denver, he saw 14 targets, turned into 7 for 96 and a touchdown. That was also a tough matchup. So I'm cool running him out there if you don't have, a better option. Zach Ertz at tight end is always someone you can put in the lineup. And then the running back room is gross. It's a tough matchup. The Vikings are kind of middle of the pack against running backs, but overall their defense is pretty solid. If I had to start one, it would be Chris Rodriguez. I don't want to play, Bill or Jeremy McNichols, but Rodriguez he's sort of in that, Kareem Hunt, Zonovan Knight, Bam Knight, I should say, kind of range where if they fall in the end zone, you'll be happy. And if not, it'll probably be a bad game. And then for the Vikings, man, I don't know who I'm starting here. Justin Jefferson is someone you can start, even though it's been really bad. He is no longer an elite, every week must start type of guy. But the Commanders are a great matchup. They're the 5th best matchup on the season for receivers. So there is an opportunity here. I will say, and actually the last 8 weeks, they're the best matchup for wide receivers overall. So, schedule adjusted, they dropped down quite a bit to they're 24th against wide receivers compared to 32nd, but still they're a defense you can exploit. The Commanders are. But Jefferson is, with JJ McCarthy not, finding his footing yet, Jefferson is still probably more in that wide receiver 2 range. I'd start him over Christian Watson. Like him versus Jalen Waddle is a good toss up. I'd probably go Jefferson just because he's so good, but and you drafted him in the 1st round, so it's like, you're gonna bench your 1st round pick for Jalen Waddle, who also could kind of disappear. But I really don't want to play Addison this week. I mean, maybe he gets in the end zone and you're happy, but it's been really bad. And if JJ McCarthy doesn't have a good game here, it's kind of like, whoa, like that's pretty worrisome, unfortunately. Because this is a great spot for him to have a get right game. I think he plays Dallas pretty soon, doesn't he? Let me look at their schedule here. The Vikings play Washington and then Dallas. So if he doesn't have, at least one good game in these next couple of weeks, that's going to be very concerning. Aaron Jones is active for this game. I believe he was dealing with a bit of an injury. He left last week's game with a shoulder injury after only getting let me see. He had 6 for 3 on the ground and 4 for 22 through the air on 4 targets, and then left the game. So he'll be back. He's running back 3, I would say. Playable, not a must start though. But if you don't have anyone else, he might be okay. If he catches some passes, falls in the end zone, could be good. 2-10 Saints at the 7-5 Buccaneers. This game has a 41.5 point over under. Gross. The Bucs are 8.5 point home favorites. Alvin Kamara is going to be out again. So Devin Neal gets to start at running back for the Saints. Chris Olave is questionable as of this recording. So obviously, he's been really good for fantasy despite the offense being bad. So that's kind of a big deal. If he plays, you're probably playing him. And then for the Bucs, Christian Wirfs at tackle is questionable. Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan won't return at wide receiver, but Mike Evans is getting closer and closer to coming back. So for a lot of teams, we'll see how he looks coming back from injury. He's getting older and he's coming off of an injury, but I feel like he'll be fantasy relevant come playoff time. And I know, like in my dynasty team, I need him. I've had so many injuries and I need him back. So I'm hoping. For the Saints, Chris Olave, Devin Neal, and that's about it. Tyler Shuck, maybe like a DFS play. But other than that, Devin Neal is going to get the volume for the Saints. It's a bad offense. They're probably going to be trailing. But last week in his start, 14 for 47 on the ground, 3 for 22 through the air, 3 targets. So you could do worse. He's in a low running back 2 kind of range. And then Chris Olave, if he's active, I would be happy to start him as a low wide receiver 1, high wide receiver 2. He's got a back injury. And it looks like there's a good chance he plays. So fingers crossed. Vele had a good performance last week. Still not looking to throw him in the lineup outside of the deepest of leagues, but DFS, someone to maybe stash. He had 8 targets last week, turned into 8 for 93 and a touchdown. And even the week before that, he saw 7 targets, only 3 for 37. But that was coming out of their bye week. And if you remember, they traded some pretty good draft capital to get him. And it was kind of weird because it's like they're not using this guy, but it seems like he's, starting to get more involved, especially now that Rashid Shaheed is gone off of that team. And then another guy I should have mentioned is Jawan Johnson at tight end. He's kind of had an up and down year, but he's kind of back as someone that is streamable. Like before their bye week, so starting in week 7, he's actually been pretty solid all year other than weeks like 4 to 6. But then after that, week 7, he had 79 yards, 53 yards, 31 yards and a touchdown, 92 and a touchdown. Bye week, 6 for 46, 5 for 39. So he's getting, he's often clearing, 7 targets. So he is playable as a low tight end 1, I would say. I'd probably play him over Zach Ertz, if that kind of helps. He's probably a little safer than Mark Andrews, but Andrews probably has more upside with the touchdowns that he tends to sometimes score, I guess. So let's get out of the Saints here. Let's go into the Bucs. Pause. Baker Mayfield, it's been rough. He's banged up. He's been missing weapons, but Chris Godwin is back. He's looked healthy. Baker is playable, but he's not like the must-start option he once was. He's off the injury report with that shoulder injury, so he's good to go. But it's been rough, especially the last couple of weeks. But you know, I don't know. He's a okay start. Good start, not great, but he's a really good player, and he could blow up. So I wouldn't just bench him straight up. Like, I'd probably play him over Bo Nix. Him versus Lamar is tough because they're both kind of dealing with the same thing where, for whatever reason, they're kind of underperforming. Baker is probably a little safer. I don't know if they're going to need him to do much in this game. They're like neck and neck, honestly. Jacoby Brissett, in a league, I have Baker and Jacoby Brissett in a 2-quarterback league. So one spot I'm playing Jalen Hurts, and then I got to decide between Baker, Jacoby, Bo Nix. I'm kind of leaning Jacoby just because I think he is going to air it out a ton, even though it's not the best matchup. But it's really close. Bucky Irving came back. He looked great last week. He missed kind of more time than we thought he would from his injury, but he's back, and 17 for 61 and a touchdown on the ground, 2 for 20 on 2 targets through the air. Says he played about half the snaps, 52%. But he still saw a healthy amount of carries, even though he didn't play a ton of snaps. And we do expect the snap percentage to go up as he gets more and more removed from that injury. So, I don't really want to play Rachaad White or Sean Tucker outside of, desperate. Well, for sure not Sean Tucker. Rachaad White, maybe. I'm trying to find his numbers and my computer is being so slow. So with Bucky Irving back, Rachaad White, 2 for 7 on the ground, 3 for 22 through the air on 3 targets. And then Tucker, 2 carries for 0 yards. So I'm staying away from either of them. At receiver, Godwin and Egbuka are both in play. Egbuka obviously is someone you're more confident in starting, even though it's been a little slow lately. I can't imagine benching him. He's in that high wide receiver 2 range. And then Chris Godwin, he came back and looked pretty good. He's probably still more of a wide receiver 3 until we see him string together some games here. But in his second game back from injury, his snaps went up by quite a bit from 36% to 66%. He saw 5 targets, turned into 3 for 78. So didn't light the world on fire, but it's good to see him actually get some yardage. And then Tez Johnson kind of falls into a category where I don't want to play him anymore. He had a moment where with all the injuries he was relevant, but no longer. And then kind of the same with Cade Otton with these guys coming back. He already wasn't a great play even with the injuries, and now like last week 2 for 9 yards, the week before that 4 for 21. I think you can do better. I think that's it for that game. Let's move on to the next here. Also, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you are enjoying the podcast. Miami Dolphins. Let's get through this game as quick as we can. Miami Dolphins at 5-7, taking on the Jets in New York, 3-9. Do they play in New York? Where do they play? Where do the Jets play? MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. So they're going to be there. The Jets are 3-9. This game has a 41.5 point over-under. Dolphins are 2.5 point road favorites. Tyrod Taylor is going to start again for the Jets. Justin Fields is actually out for this game. He's got an injury, so even if they wanted to, they wouldn't play him, which they don't want to. It hasn't really been going well. So for the Dolphins, Achane, you're starting at running back. Jalen Waddle, you're starting at wide receiver. Even though it's been kind of slow, he's still kind of, I'd probably say a low wide receiver 1, depending on how you rank him with Jefferson and Egbuka and Olave and AJ Brown, those type of guys. But other than that, Darren Waller at tight end he's back, and he's an okay streamer. You can play him. I probably have to flex him in my dynasty league with Kyle Pitts at tight end because my injuries are just off the chain in that league, bro. I still have the most points in the league somehow, defending champ. So my goodness, man. Anyways, Jets are kind of middle of the pack against tight ends on the year. He's going to need a touchdown to be good for fantasy. His first game back off of the bye week last week, 2 for 47 off of the bye week and off of injury. 47% of snaps, 2 for 47 on 3 targets. The third target was almost a touchdown, just missed. So I think you can put him right back out there as a low tight end 1, high tight end 2, I would say. And then Tua, I'm not looking to start, but hopefully he can get the ball to his weapons. And then for the Jets, Tyrod Taylor last week had himself a solid game. In a 2-quarterback league, he's someone that could be interesting. He was 19 of 33, 172 and 1 touchdown, 8 for 44 and a touchdown on the ground. Not a must start by any means, but you know, in a 2-quarterback league, he's a mid to low quarterback 2. I'd probably play him over Tua on the other side. And then other than that, Breece Hall at running back. I'd be looking to play him as a running back 1. I think he should have success here. The Dolphins are they're middle of the pack against running backs, it looks like, on the season. In terms of, yeah, they've kind of hovered around middle of the pack most of the year. So I think it's an okay spot where if you have him, you're playing him as a low running back 1. You hope he scores. You hope he catches passes. Since their bye week, he hasn't had more than 4 targets, which is a bit frustrating. So he had 1 target. He turned it into 1 for 42 and a touchdown. Next week, 2 targets, 2 for 6. The week after that, 4 targets, caught him all for 75 yards. And then last week, 2 targets, 2 for 8. So the pattern continues. He's due for a big receiving game, but that also tells me, like, hey, man, throw this guy the ball. Like, yes, you can hand him off the ball, but what really makes him a valuable running back is his pass catching ability. So, he's still seeing a lot of volume on the ground, so playing him. And then at receiver, it's gross, but John Mechie and Adonai Mitchell, or Adonai Mitchell, or however people are saying it now, they've been okay. Mitchell last week, 12 targets, 8 for 102 and a touchdown. The week before that, 7 targets, only turned into 2 for 42. And the week before that, 6 targets, only turned into 1 for 10. So he finally did something with his targets. He's playable. He is playable as a wide receiver 3. And he is kind of a guy that has the physical ability to make big plays, whereas John Mechie is probably more of a PPR type of guy. Last week, 4 for 19, but he did see 8 targets. He also had a carry and went for -2 yards. But and then the week before that, 7 targets, turned into 6 for 65. So I'd probably lean Mitchell, but in a deep league, Mechie is a wide receiver, probably wide receiver 4, I would say. And then, yeah, Mason Taylor, I like him long term. This week, probably not. It's kind of cooled down a little bit. The offense isn't great, but let's get out of this game. Let's move on to, an even better game. Not going to make me upchuck at all. Tennessee Titans at the Cleveland Browns. The 1-11 Titans taking on the 3-9 Browns in Cleveland. Gross. Absolutely disgusting. Wow. The over-under is a comically low 33.5, 4.5 point favorites. The Browns are. I said that weird. Sorry. Who do you want to start? On the Brown side, it's Quinshon Judkins at running back. I'm totally cool starting him, especially because, with the Browns being favored by 4.5, game script could line up where, Judkins is able to carry the ball. If he scores, you're going to be extra happy. Like last week, he saw 23 carries, 91 yards. So in these types of games, he can get 20 plus carries. So he's a low running back 1, high running back 2. I don't want to start Judy or Tillman or Bond. Shedeur Sanders is starting again, by the way, for the Browns. Not starting him, but Harold Fannin Jr. at tight end is okay. It always makes me nervous because, David Njoku is also there, but the tight end position is gross enough where, he's been solid since their bye week. 7, 5, 6, and 5 targets. It hasn't always turned into the best things for fantasy, but he's had 40 to 44 yards in 3 of those 4 games last week, 3 for 43 and a touchdown. So he's sort of a low tight end 1. Him versus Waller is interesting. They're probably pretty similar. I probably like the odds of Waller scoring a little bit, just because I think there's going to be more points scored overall. And then on the Titans side, I'm literally not starting a single player. Not Tony Pollard, not Tajay Spears, not Aya Manor, not DK, not Van Jefferson. Gunnar Helm at tight end. He's flashed a little bit. He's seen 5, 7, and 7 targets the last few weeks since their bye week. 4 for 29, 6 for 51, and then 6 for 23 last week. So DFS dart throw maybe, but no, not starting Cam Ward. I don't think I'm starting any Titans outside of like DFS. If you want to like go against the grain, go against the chalk, get some leverage in the tournament. Broncos 10-2, traveling to take on the Raiders at 2-10. Palindrome game. Broncos, what week was that? A few weeks ago, they played the same Raiders team in Denver, and they squeaked out a win, 10-7. The Broncos offense has looked a little gross lately. There's been some okay performances lately, I guess, but on the season, you just never know what offense you're going to get. So I'm not looking at this matchup as like, oh, they're playing the Raiders. Oh, the 10-2 Broncos taking on the 2-10 Raiders. They're going to dominate and put up 50 points. Like, maybe they will, but there's also a chance they put up, 10 points where you're like, oh, Bo Nix cost me my week. For what it's worth, where is this line? The Broncos are 7.5 point road favorites, so they're projected to win, probably on defense, and just because the Raiders are so terrible. Bo Nix is a startable quarterback still, even after what I said. He's in that low quarterback 1 range. It's really close between guys like, Lamar, Baker, Brissett, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence. So I'd probably start Lamar over Bo Nix just because, both of these guys have downside, but Lamar Jackson is Lamar Jackson. Bo Nix versus Baker is a real decision I have to make versus Brissett. For some reason, I feel like Brissett I might just put in Brissett. He's been a quarterback 1 like every start he's played. So it's kind of hard to be like, oh, I'm going to play a guy who might be a quarterback 1, but if things go right, Nix probably has the most upside of some of those guys, but it could definitely go wrong. RJ Harvey is a good volume play at running back. He hasn't been as electric as I think people thought he would be, but last week 13 for 35 on the ground, but he had 2 rushing touchdowns against Washington and then 3 for 27 through the air on 4 targets. He's a mid to high running back 2. I worry about the efficiency a little bit. The behind the scene metrics aren't great. And the wide receiver room for the Broncos is really gross with Cortland Sutton, Troy Franklin, Pat Bryant. I would personally play Cortland Sutton above them all. He's been kind of touchdown dependent, but the last time he played Vegas, only 3 for 24 on 4 targets. On the season, he's probably been the best to roster. Last week against Washington, 5 for 62 and a touchdown on 6 targets. So he's a low wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3. I'd play him over DK Metcalf for what it, kind of give you an idea. Troy Franklin, I don't really want to start here. If I'm going to take a shot on one receiver, it's going to be Sutton, but Troy Franklin very well could be the guy you want. You just don't know. So he's a wide receiver 3, and then Marvin Mims, not playing him. Pat Bryant is having a little bit of a breakout as a rookie. Not like anything crazy, but 3 for 42 on 7 targets last week. By a week before that, and then against the Chiefs the week before, 5 for 82 on 6 targets. So not putting him in the lineup, but more of someone to stash if you have the bench space. And then Evan Ingram, I'm still not dipping into that well in my lineup, but 6 for 79 on 9 targets last week. Maybe down the stretch he's someone that, kind of turns it up a little bit, but I think you probably have better options. And then for the Raiders, Brock Bowers is obviously a must start at tight end. Against the Broncos in week 10, he only had 1 catch for 31 yards on 3 targets, so that's a bit annoying. Sometimes the Raiders just don't throw him the ball as much as they should. Geno Smith at quarterback has not been good for fantasy. I'm not playing him, but more importantly, it's affecting kind of the weapons in this offense. Ashton. He's not Aston. He's a good player. He's a playable running back too, but this season hasn't been what we hoped. Against Denver in week 10, he was 19 for 60 and a touchdown on the ground. He saw 5 targets and caught 3 of them, but only for 3 yards. But, he's been pretty good most weeks. Last week was rough, 15 for 31. 8 targets turned into 6 for 30, but he's had 8 targets 3 weeks in a row. So, he's a running back too. So you're most likely starting him. Maybe if you got Bucky Irving back, you're going to start Bucky over him. I'd start Chase Brown, Breece Hall over him. Javonte already played. Judkins, I would probably play over Genty. So kind of give you a little look into that. And then I don't want to play Tyler Lockett, Trey Tucker. Don't want to play the wide receiver game with the Raiders. So let's move on. Ooh, this game might be a fun one. The LA Rams taking on the Arizona Cardinals. The Rams at 3-9. The Rams at 9-3. The Cardinals at 3-9. Palindrome. Cardinals at home. This game's in Arizona in a dome. I haven't missed any weather updates, have I? Oh, I should have said the Cleveland game, it's supposed to snow, 10-mile-an-hour winds. That doesn't really affect anything to me because if you're playing Judkins, that doesn't affect the running game. And if you're playing Fannin close to the line of scrimmage targets, should be fine. Also, just because it snows doesn't mean it's going to be like a bad game offensively. It's going to be a bad game offensively because the offenses are 2 of the worst in the NFL. But 10-mile-an-hour winds, it's not a huge deal. And I'm so sorry I forgot to say this earlier. The Jacksonville Jags game, there is some rain projected. So 7-mile-an-hour winds. If it's a downpour, maybe it'll affect things, but that's kind of a bummer if it does. But it's hard to predict the rain ahead of time, so that's something to monitor. And then the Tampa, I totally forgot to check the weather for these games. I apologize. The Tampa Bay Bucks, 12-mile-per-hour winds around that range, and then definite thunderstorms. So if any of these games are like gross weather games, you have to temper your expectations a little bit. It doesn't seem like anything is too crazy as of this recording, of the ones that I just mentioned. But if it is crazy, you might have to downgrade some people. Or sometimes I use weather as a tiebreaker. Like if someone's playing in a gross kind of wet, a wet game, I might lean someone who's, maybe got better weather. So I forgot to mention those couple of games. So I'm sorry about that. But this game is in a dome. Arizona Cardinals at home against the Rams. The Rams are favored in this game by, where is it? 10 on the road. 47.5 point over under though. I think this game could be good for fantasy with that over under. And even if the Rams win by 10 points, I think the Cardinals could still give us some fantasy production as well. So on the Rams side of the ball, Stafford is my start of the week. I'm going back to him as a quarterback 1. He doesn't run the ball, which affects his floor, but I think he's good for at least a couple passing touchdowns here. Puka, Devontae at receiver, you're starting them. And then Kyron Williams at running back. Blake Corum has been getting involved, but Kyron Williams is still someone I'm happy to start as a low running back 1, high running back 2. 12, and 13 carries the last 3 weeks. Not seeing a lot of work in the passing game, but he scored in 4 of the last 5 games since their bye week. So you're most likely starting him unless you have a stacked like 8 or 10 team league. And then Blake Corum, I don't want to start him, even though he's getting a little more involved. He's sort of like Bashal Tutin, where, you know, maybe he'll fall in the end zone. Like last week, only 7 carries, but 81 yards and a touchdown. He's actually, since their bye week, he's seen 13, 8, 7, and 7 carries. So maybe like DFS or really deep leagues, you could start him as a running back 3 and hope he falls in the end zone, but I'm not chasing that performance from last week. And then the Cardinals side of the ball is pretty easy for me. Jacoby Brissett is someone who I'm perfectly fine starting. He's not a must start, but he's been super consistent. He's throwing the ball a ton. And I believe he's been a quarterback 1 in all of his starts. So, you know, the Rams have a good defense, but points are going to have to be scored. And I think they're going to do it through the air. And the Rams are a brutal run defense. If you are going to score on them, you know, it's probably going to come through the air. If they do score fantasy points on the ground, it's probably going to be like a goal line carry, which would probably go to Bam Knight. So the active running backs here are going to be Bam Knight and Michael Carter. Trey Benson has not been activated, and there's a chance he doesn't come back this year, which is annoying because, again, my dynasty team needs players to come back. You know, it's brutal. So I don't want to start any of these running backs in this game. I might have to start Michael Carter in dynasty. If I had to pick one, it would be Bam, Zonovan Knight. But, you know, in a dynasty league, you don't have that luxury to just pick people up. So 6 targets last week for Michael Carter. Please give me something if I have to play him. And then if I had to pick one, it'd be Zonovan Knight, Bam Knight, whatever you want to call him. He's just a touchdown dependent guy. 11 for 62 last week, 3 for 36 through the air. He did catch a touchdown. He's had some good games. He's had some bad games. Probably just a touchdown dependent guy, but running back 3, high running back 3. I'd probably prefer him over, like, he's kind of like Kareem Hunt, Chris Rodriguez. I'd play him over Gainwell, Corum, Tutin. So it's close though. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. is out at wide receiver for the Cardinals. So Michael Wilson gets a bump. He's my start of the week at receiver, like I said. And then Trey McBride at tight end. He is a smash start each and every week. Don't care about the matchup. Don't care about nothing. Moving on. This should be another good game. Chicago Bears 9-3, traveling to Lambeau Field to take on the Packers at 8-3-1. I believe the Packers are favored. Let's see here. They're favored by 7. The over-under is 43.5. What's the weather supposed to be in this game? Why am I not seeing it? 17 degrees, a little wind, like 7 miles per hour. Clear skies. So really, even though it's going to be a little chilly, it shouldn't affect things too much. Rome Odunze is out at receiver for the Bears. So that's kind of big news. I believe I just heard that Jaden Reed has been activated at receiver. I'm going to verify that, but I thought I heard that while I was recording. He's off IR, set for return versus the Bears. So with Rome Odunze out, that means he can't hurt you in your lineup this week because he's been pretty bad lately. So this game is it could be a lower scoring game. It remains to be seen, but Caleb Williams is a little erratic, and against a good Packers defense, I don't really want to play him as more than like a mid quarterback 2 in a super flex league. DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai. Good news for Monangai is he's getting more and more involved. Bad news for the backfield as a whole is that makes, who do you start a little more of a question. So against the Eagles last week, both of them looked great. 18 for 125 and 1 for DeAndre Swift. Had a catch for 13 yards as well for DeAndre Swift. But then Monangai himself, he had 22 carries for 130 yards and a touchdown. He scored in 4 straight games. 1 target, didn't catch it. So I think both are playable. I think they're both going to be involved. And it's just a matter of who gets the work, who falls in the end zone. So it looks like Monangai has a little more juice at this point, but they're pretty much neck and neck. I think they're basically, the same. Like if you have both, okay, then you have to decide who to play. But if you have one of them, I think you can start him as like a low to mid running back 2. And then with no Roma Dunze, that kind of increases my confidence in DJ Moore just a little bit. He's a good player, but just not getting the involvement he's used to getting this year. So he's playable. I wouldn't force him in the lineup, but he's probably in that wide receiver 3 range, I would say. Like, I'd probably play him over Xavier Worthy against Houston, over Romeo Dobbs on the other side of the ball, probably over Troy Franklin. He's probably right in that range. Like, Troy Franklin, Brian Thomas Jr. Him versus Chris Godwin is close, so he's probably in that sort of range with like Debo Samuel. And then Luther Burden, the rookie receiver, I probably don't want to play him, but with this opportunity in a deep league or DFS, you can start him. And more of someone I kind of want to monitor to see like what does he do with this opportunity. So long term, you can get an idea of kind of what to expect from him. And then Colston Loveland, he's kind of flashed. Whoops, sorry about that. Flashed a little bit lately at tight end. With Roma Dunze out, I kind of like to play a little bit more. The Packers do have a good defense. In general, they're pretty stingy against tight ends the last 8 weeks. They're the 6th toughest matchup against the position. But just with, the tight end position, how kind of bare it is, pun intended. He is someone you can play as probably like a high tight end 2. Like I'd probably play Waller over him, honestly, but I'd play Loveland over like K-Dot and AJ Barner, Evan Ingram, Dallas Goedert, guys like that. If you want to play him over Dalton Schultz or Zach Ertz for a little more upside, that's cool. And then for the Packers, it should be a good game for Josh Jacobs as long as he, remains healthy. He's kind of been banged up, but he should be fine here. He's off the injury report, which is good. So he's a running back 1. The Bears looks like they're the 8th toughest matchup against running backs the last 8 weeks. So it's kind of down on the season. They're middle of the pack, but still, I'm totally cool starting Jacobs. Obviously, you're starting him every week. And then a receiver, the only one I really want to start is Watson. He's been really good lately. He's a really solid wide receiver 2 this week, in my opinion. Dobbs, Wicks, now that Jayden Reed is back, I don't really want to mess with that. I want to give Jayden Reed at least a week off the injury to see how he looks and how involved he is. I don't want to start Luke Musgrave or anybody at tight end. And Jordan Love, he's a weird fantasy quarterback. Most weeks, if you play him, you've been disappointed. He is coming off of a big game against Detroit. So do with that what you will. I'm not like clamoring to get him in my lineup. And I think there is definitely a scenario where this is not a high scoring game. Josh Jacobs, scores a touchdown or 2. Maybe the defense, puts in work and Jordan Love doesn't really have a big game, but the Bears are a pretty good matchup for QBs on the season. So I think he could have a good game, but he's gonna need to throw, 2+ touchdowns. And even if he throws 2 touchdowns, you might be like, oh well, he didn't do much else. So kind of probably a high quarterback 2. I'd start Jacoby over him, Baker, Bo Nix, Trevor Lawrence. I'd probably start over him. Him versus Danny Dimes and Sam Darnold is where it starts to get a little closer for me. So he's in that area. And we got the Sunday night game, Houston Texans at 7-5, traveling to Arrowhead to take on the Kansas City Chiefs, who are 6-6. Both teams need a win. I think the Chiefs will win this game. Just the way the script of the NFL is. Are they really going to miss the playoffs? I doubt it. So Vegas thinks, according to the DraftKings Sportsbook, that the Chiefs will win. They're 3.5-point home favorites. Over under 41.5. So could be a defensive battle. For the Chiefs, you can play Mahomes, but just know that the Texans are literally the toughest matchup against quarterbacks on the year, and they've shut down everyone. Kareem Hunt is a touchdown or bust, like desperate running back play. Even though it's a tough matchup against the Texans, I don't think he's gonna, run for a lot of yardage or anything. It's kind of the same case every week where if he falls in the end zone and gets 40 total yards, okay, he's in double digits. Rashee Rice is the only receiver I'm looking to play here. It's a tough matchup, like I said, but he's still a wide receiver 1. And then Travis Kelce, given the landscape and given how the landscape of the position and how necessary he is to the offense, I'd still be fine playing him. But the Texans are tough, very tough against receivers. They are very tough against tight ends. So it could be a game where you temper your expectations. Mahomes could have a disappearing act. He really could. They could still win this game and have it be a gross game. They haven't been doing that as much this year. They've been losing their one-score games. Defense hasn't been quite as dominant, at least off the top of my head. I don't think it has been, but Mahomes is still in play as a, low to mid quarterback 1. And then for the Texans, I don't really want to play Stroud. Woody Marks, it's a brutal matchup. Like, Woody Marks is the guy to have in that backfield for the Texans, but it's just a brutal matchup. It really is. So I think Woody, you can put Woody in. You can put the Woody in. Pause. As I'd say a low running back 2. Like him versus the Bears guys, or like Jalen Warren. I'd probably play Jalen Warren over Marks. Devin Neal, very close. I think Neal isn't as good, but I think he's more likely to score fantasy points, just slightly, given the matchup. Yeah, the Chiefs are tough against running backs. At wide receiver, you're starting Nico Collins. This is not a game where I want to throw in, Jaden Higgins or anyone. Dalton Schultz he's been a streamable option with his target totals he's seeing. So you can play him as a low tight end 1, high tight end 2, but if this game is gross, you're probably going to be disappointed. So moving on to the last game of the week, the Philadelphia Eagles traveling to LA to take on the Chargers. Both teams 8-4. 42.5 point over under. A lot of kind of gross games this week, huh? The Eagles are 2.5 point road favorites. Omarion Hampton at running back is expected to be back for the Chargers, so that's big. And Justin Herbert is questionable with a left hand injury. So I'm cool getting away from Justin Herbert if you want to stream someone off of waivers. Like Jared Goff, if you would have played him on Thursday, I would have been cool with that. Even though he didn't have a great game, I probably would have done that. Same with Dak Prescott, obviously. Who's another guy? Like maybe take the shot on Bo Nix, Jacoby Brissett, Trevor Lawrence. I'd probably play them over Herbert just because Herbert's been good, but he's had games where it really hasn't been good for fantasy, and now he's got this injury. You might have to make a decision before the Sunday games. And he's playing the Eagles, who have a good defense. I will say though, and the Chargers O-line is not good, but Jalen Carter is out at defensive tackle for the Eagles, and Lane Johnson at tackle is out on offense. So those are 2 huge injuries that might not, make headlines. It's not like Jalen Hurts is out, but those are probably the 2 biggest non-skill position injuries they could have. Unless I'm forgetting something, but so Jalen Carter is a huge force in the middle of that Eagles defense. So without him, gives me a little more hope for the Chargers offense. So Herbert, I'm fine getting away from. If he's good to go, he could definitely have an okay game. He really could. But just with the injury in the matchup, it's not my favorite spot for Justin Herbert. If Hampton is back, I'm gonna play him. Even in a tough matchup, not a must start, but unless you have a really good option, He's probably in the running back 2 range. Like he's probably right next to like Jalen Warren and the Bears guys, and I'd play him over Woody Marks. I'd probably play Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker over him, maybe Genty, Harvey. So, and then these receivers, Ladd McConkey has kind of been the guy where big picture, he's probably the best receiver to have there. Just the most involved, the best for fantasy. Quentin Johnston, he's cooled off a little bit. He's more in that wide receiver 3 range now. He hasn't really had a big fantasy game lately. He had a touchdown last week, but only 3 for 23. And then Keenan Allen, he's sort of not really startable at this point. Like he hasn't had a good game in, 4 for 53 in week 11 is okay. 4 for 44 in week 8. His last really good game was week 7, where he had 11 for 119 and a touchdown on 14 targets. So he's had 5 targets in 4 of his last 5 games, and he had 6 targets in the other game. So, and then Gadsden, he's been cooling off too. Like, if you want to take a shot at any of these guys, like you can. If they get in the end zone, you'll be happy. But Gadsden is probably, he was looking like a tight end 1 must start option, but now he's probably like a high tight end 2, low tight end 1 at best. And Kamani Vidal, I could see him being involved with Hampton 1 week back from the injury, but I'm probably not starting him other than like a running back 3 at best, I would say. And then for the Eagles, Jalen Hurts, you're starting him. I've seen a lot of places rank Stafford over Jalen Hurts. If you want to do that, I'm cool with that. I'd probably lean Jalen Hurts still, but just with his, tush push, his rushing. But their offense has been really bad in Philly. So Saquon Barkley, at this point, I would say this week he's more of a, probably a running back 2. And then if you take a look at the receivers here, Really, Cooper? You're shaking that thing while I'm giving this expert analysis on AJ Brown. AJ Brown's actually been really good the last couple of weeks, so it's a tougher matchup than Dallas and Chicago and Detroit, but Detroit week 11, 7 for 49, I guess isn't great, but last 2 weeks, 8 for 110 and a touchdown in week 12 against Dallas, and then 10 for 132 and 2 against Chicago. So you're playing him. And then Devontae Smith is a wide receiver 2. I wouldn't say he's a must start, but if you have him, you're probably starting him. And Dallas Goedert, if he gets in the end zone, you'll probably be happy that you started him. He's probably more of a tight end 2 at this point. He hasn't had a good week since their bye week. Week 9, the week before that, in week 8, he was 3 for 28, but he had 2 touchdowns. He hasn't had a touchdown since then, so that's kind of why he's been a little slower. But all right, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. As always, good luck to everyone but your opponents in week 14. Don't forget to drop a like, follow, subscribe wherever you are enjoying the podcast. I will see you in the next one. Peace.